Hi, my name is Katherine Everitt, and I am going to be teaching this course on the void for GCAS starting on, let's see, what's the date? September 20th. We're going to do 4 classes, September 20th, 21st, 27th, and 28th. Those are Saturdays and Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today is August 29th, and I'm recording this video as an introduction to the entire course. I will do a few more videos on each reading that we're going to do. I've been asked to do about 5 minutes here, so I'm just going to kind of give some general remarks, kind of see where this goes. So the course on the void is really motivated in a very simple way by just asking really, what is the void? I want to start by thinking about the void in its roots in ancient thought, in ancient Greece and Rome, thinking specifically about the void as something that was naturalistic. That's why we're reading Lucretius. It was a debate then if there is such a thing as a void in nature. We can even look into Enlightenment science and creating a vacuum, right? This was a very notable achievement. But even, Aristotle makes a point that there can't be a void. How can there be a void? How can there be emptiness? Nature abhors an empty space, he says, right? There must always be something there. Descartes later on will agree as well. There can only be res cogito and res extensa. If there's extension, how can there be an empty space? What's there? Is God there? No, there's always something there. There's always extension. So perhaps today we're not as concerned with the naturalistic question of emptiness. There's something compelling about this, but we are usually thinking in this post-Enlightenment context about emptiness, about the void, in a sense of logic and in a sense of subjectivity. But we need to start with the ancients, because that's really where the question comes up. And its transformation from a naturalistic question into a logical and a subjective question is really informative and interesting for the history of philosophy and the history of thought. I mean, ultimately, one of the big questions I want to ask is, why does the void persist in our thinking? It seems so simple at first glance, right? We're just thinking about emptiness. Like, what's so interesting about that? But it persists with us and it fascinates us. Just on one level, when we think about the void, we usually mean unbound emptiness. If it was just in a box, well, then that's a vacuum, right? Or that's just like an empty glass or something, right? We could say the glass is void, especially in maybe not in English, but in like German and in French. The word for void is the same as emptiness, right? In German it's leer or leere, in French it's vide. And so they would say the glass is void. In English we don't. It's interesting. We really have kind of used the void as to have its own distinct meaning. We don't really say the glass is void. We may say a contract is null and void, right? It has like this legalistic definition. It no longer operates and no longer works. And I do want to talk about the etymology in more detail, but to think about the void as boundless, that's a really beautiful question, right? Because clearly that's not naturalistic, right? There is stuff, the void couldn't be boundless, right? Why is there something instead of nothing, right, per Heidegger? And yet it still can become an object of thought, right? Emptiness is an object of thought. This is often where people say, oh, this reminds me of, like Buddhism, right? And you're certainly not wrong to make that connection. So yeah, emptiness has, fascinated East and West forever. Well, forever, so, as long as we have a history of thought. So I want to untangle this in the class. I want to think about what is so compelling about this question, and really, I think in a very strong way, why emptiness is a ground. Why emptiness is the ground of thought. This is, a very Hegelian kind of move, right? To say that the ground underneath our feet is emptiness itself. But this is how Hegel starts the logic, is with emptiness, with leer, with leere, with the void. If you read the English translation, it's translated in every version, I think, as emptiness and not as void in those first pages, the pages on being, nothing, and becoming. It's only a couple sections in that we really talk about the void, and the German is translated from Leere into English as the void. Okay, I've hit 5 minutes here, and this was just sort of like some really preliminary thoughts. So we're going to read a couple different texts. We're going to read The Nature of Things by Lucretius. We're going to read a couple pages from The Science of Logic. Whoops. It really is, a dense text, so I only assigned a few pages. Being an event, that's going to be like the big challenging read. I think we're reading the first part of Being an Event, Being Multiple and Void, Plato Cantor. That I'm really excited to really dig into Being an Event with y'all. We're going to read The Atom and the Void from Democritus Silicon by Mladen Delar. That is such a wonderful text. I would say if I were to approach this syllabus, the first weekend, definitely read the Lucretius and the Hegel. For the second weekend, definitely read the Badiou and the Delar. I threw in my own text there, for fun, if you are interested in reading it. It does relate to the void. Just a note on the reading. So we're going to read the first 2 books of The Nature of Things. Such a beautiful read, a really fun read. It should be incredibly enjoyable. The Alison Stallings translation is phenomenal. I don't know how she did it. It's really a work of art. Science of Logic, I just want to clarify what I assigned. I want you to read, I want you to read the one and the many section from chapter 3, Being for Itself. I indicated that's pages 132 to 137, but please also just read the first page of Science of Logic, the actual, after the introduction, the actual first section, Sein, the being section. Read the first page. There's 3 very short paragraphs. Being, nothing, becoming. Being, pure being without any further determination, nothing, the pure nothing. Those 3 paragraphs are super short, but read them because we're going to be making connections between those 3 preliminary paragraphs and the one in the void section later on that we're going to be reading. So we're going to be reading back and forth. If you have the stamina, just read straight through. That's like 80 pages of Hegel or something, which, it will take time if you do want to do that. But if that's too much, which it certainly could be too much, just read those 6 pages I've assigned for the first week. I think the rest is pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to stop here. Hope that was a nice intro. And can't wait for class. I'll do a couple more videos on the particular readings. Thanks.